informative speech. Slavery, a term commonly used during the Civil War era, has now made a comeback to modern day. It is subtle in the sense that many people do not recognize it at first. Human trafficking is the modern-day slavery. Slavery can occur for a variety of reasons, but it's not limited to sexual exploitation, prostitution, or even parents selling one or more children for money. Debt, unpaid labor, or getting money to raise a family can all be reasons why someone can go into this business. Human trafficking, for many reasons, is a prevalent issue that can happen all over the world. India is one of the countries with the most forced laborers. In the book, The Fight to End Global Slavery, author Benjamin Skinner states that an international anti-slavery group known as Free the Slaves estimates that there are between 10 and 20 million slaves in India today. Think of that, 10 to 20 million human beings as slaves. Skinner also says that India has more slaves today than than at any point in human history. And because of the prevalence in slavery, India has more forced bondage than the rest of the world combined. The number may seem outrageous, but it includes both coercion to get people into the slave trade and people going into it voluntarily, state Nicholas Kristof and Shara Budon, authors of the book Half the Sky. In the picture on the left, there is a boy who is in forced labor. In the book Half the Sky, Kristof and Budon show the history of slavery. In 1807, when slavery was first brought to an end in the British Empire, it did not include India. It was only after the Slavery Abolition Act when British officials declared Indian slaves free. The influences of abolishing slavery did reach India, but not until much later. There was no political control throughout the country, and despite the act and many unsuccessful attempts, many of the slaves chose to keep serving their masters. People began referring to this as voluntary slavery, and in 1926, slavery was officially driven out of India. In Skinner's article, he states that the 2000 Trafficking Victims Protection Act states the slave trade is anything that consists of the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. By this law, many traffickers are charged with harboring. However, hereditary debt bondage has come to be one form of slavery that is rarely ever prosecuted. Many of the traffickers are unlikely to be prosecuted, and many people who go into prostitution are not forced into it. And oftentimes, women will go into prostitution to raise money for their family and their children. An example of this comes from Skinner's article about Maria and how she went into prostitution. Maria went into it on a volunteer basis. However, when she got into Russia, the woman who helped her took her passport and all of her belongings. She told Maria she automatically owed a $10,000 debt before she could return to her country. If she tried to run away, her children, her family, and her friends would be killed. Like Maria, many other women who go into prostitution go into it voluntarily but are threatened to stay into it. The views Skinner saw within his trip to India demonstrate his own account. He had an outside view of how life was. Human trafficking is part of this life. Human trafficking, sexual exploitation, and forced labor is not just happening in India, but also in other countries too. Kristof and Budon say that China has a higher rate of prostitution than India, but the difference lies within the circumstances. Chinese women are often go into prostitution on a volunteer basis, knowing the risk that are involved. Indian women are much likely to be forced into it. In conclusion, slavery is most commonly known as a bondage that forces people to do work. However, we know this is not always how it happens. Human trafficking is now the modern-day slavery, and while there are many different sides of it, some of them include sexual exploitation, selling children for money, or even prostitution. Debt or unpaid labor can be reasons why someone can go into this business. There have been increasing numbers where people have been taking action to help out with this problem. Mindy Willman, author of the article Human Trafficking in Asia, explains that there are laws in Asia that help to stop trafficking, but the countries that have the laws are the countries that have the most trafficking within them. While this may be one side of the story, Skinner states in his article, George Bush pledged $50 million to fight child sex trafficking on September 23, 2003. Free the Slaves estimates that it would take about $400 to rescue any one person from any type of trafficking and put them into a rehabilitation center. The boy on the right was rescued from trafficking, and he went to the rehabilitation center, and that's him after a few months. As you can see, there are many actions taking place to stop human trafficking and ultimately stop trafficking once and for all.